Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Webinar Talk Show. My name is Tom Singer.
And I'm Liz Green. And Tom, I just can't believe the amazing guests we're getting for our second season. It's just been one great guest after the other. And of course, our theme is don't cancel your event. But today we're going to talk about a little bit different topic in that a lot of the people that we work with are event professionals, are association driven, or maybe they work in a company. But we're going to talk about nonprofit things, events that are usually fundraising events, and how our nonprofits are navigating these uncertain times.
Absolutely, because if you think about fundraising for a nonprofit, I know that a lot of the people I know who work in the nonprofit world, early on in COVID, they pulled back. They didn't feel it was the time to say, hey, can you write me a check? But we've been at this for 7 months now. And so I thought we should have an expert with us. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea.
So today, Liz and I are joined by Marc Pitman. And Marc is a leadership coach, and he helps leaders in nonprofits and in corporations. He helps them find their focus through really challenging times. And he has a new book coming out that is going to be called The Surprising Gift of Doubt, which I love that title because so often we think, oh, if I have self-doubt or doubt of what I'm doing, everything's going to crater around me. And Marc says that's a gift. So Marc Pitman, welcome to the Webinar Talk Show.
It's great to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. I know that you've been an avid watcher of our show, and you've shared some really good comments, and we love to have the people who watch the show on the show. So this is kind of fun. So Marc, in your introduction, I said that you help leaders find focus in challenging times. Have we had challenging times the last 7 months?
Oh my goodness, have we ever? Yeah, I thought I would have used that introduction a year ago, but now it's just even more so. I want to change it. So the theme for you guys, I want to change it to, for the next 29 minutes to don't cancel your fundraising.
Yeah, well, that's right. And fundraising isn't just about events, but there are a lot of fundraising events. So I think we can tie sort of all of that together. So let's talk about the world of nonprofits. How have they been impacted?
Well, the great world of nonprofits, the big world, the sector has seen a decrease in giving, but there's a bunch of us that have been more in the sector for a long time that are shocked because everything we knew about fundraising has been thrown on its ear. The wrong response we know in a downturn is to pull back. Don't pull back from fundraising. It seems respectful. It's a tough time for people. But what I tell the people I work with is that's making a decision for the donor. And how dare you make a decision for them?
But a lot of people have pulled back, right?
Well, that's the problem. A lot of people have pulled back, and that has made it so that they're seeing a lack of revenue. What we saw right out of the gate was a bunch of us have been through, this is our fourth recession, even though it's a pandemic too, but crisis giving usually spikes for a few weeks if you hit it hard, and then it decreases. And then in a recession, it goes below normal. We have to communicate even harder before you can come back up to a new level. And it takes a lot of work, but the people that communicate consistently and clearly through the trough actually come out faster and stronger in the end. 2008, we saw that the people that actually hired fundraising people, not fundraising events, during the recession actually came out stronger. They learned how to communicate better. They stayed in. Part of it's just staying in touch with the people. This is for companies too. If you stop talking to people, they think you're not relevant anymore. So as you keep talking to donors, keep talking to customers, then they realize that you're top of mind for them too.
I liked your phrase about communicating through the trough. That it is, I think we're all guilty of that. I certainly know in my own business, I probably pulled back. I didn't want to be pestering our event professional colleagues as they're trying to figure out how to manage events being postponed and canceled and that sort of thing. And I've worked in nonprofit long enough that in the past that, that's sort of the thing, like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't bother people. How are you coaching people to communicate through that trough? I mean, obviously, maybe you're not doing the same sort of like, write me a check communication, but what are you asking them to do?
Well, First of all, I'm asking them to take it on faith. Just trust me the first time, because once you see donors' response, then it becomes very convincing to want to keep doing it. But the first set of calls in the early part of the pandemic were, "How are you doing?" calls. And we can still do that. If you haven't reached out to people in your association or in your nonprofit, you can still call up and just say, "We're calling members and just seeing how they're doing." These are weird times. I learned in the last recession to not say that everybody's hurting, because we don't know that. Especially now there's talk of a K-shaped recovery where some people are already back to normal, not normal, but they're economically okay. And then other people are really, really, really hurting. And so we could just say, this is a weird time to be living in, and we're just checking with our members, or we're checking with those closest to us to see how you're doing. If that feels weird as a nonprofit professional or a board member, that means you've been doing communications wrong the whole time.
Well, it's interesting.
We're supposed to be talking to them.
You talk about that K-shaped recovery. I wrote a blog post recently. I called it "The Tale of Two Pandemics," because there are people who their only real hardship has been they've had to work from home. They continue to get their paycheck. Everything in their company seems to continue. Sales are still happening. It certainly depends on what their product or service is, where other people, their entire livelihood has been disrupted, and the news media reports restaurants, but they don't talk about the person who runs the kids' soccer league or the dance clinic or professional speakers who speak at live events. So if you can't make the decision for your donors and your members, how do you communicate, since you don't know which side of the fence people are on?
Excellent question. So what I've been recommending people do is, first of all, get back to their core values. A lot of times we have mission creep. And so we start doing a lot of things that aren't necessarily our core, but they're proximate, they're good, they're in the space. So really honing down on what is our essentials. And at this point, at the time of this recording, these many months into the pandemic, we can start asking, what are the things that we've stopped doing that we don't need to pick up again? There are certain meetings, there are certain people that we were talking about, or events that we were doing that, most people are finding their virtual events are much more, their online fundraising events are producing a lot more money for a lot less cost than the in-person things.
Well, and that's something that we heard, if we go way back to the beginning of this show and the pandemic, in our conversation with Mary Lou Peck about the shift that NSA, the association that all of us belong to, the National Speakers Association, their pivot into the virtual space, and recognizing that this is an opportunity in many ways to really examine the purpose, the mission, as you said, of the events, what needs to continue into the future, and what are some of the things, this is the opportunity, maybe they were, loved traditions that we've done for a long time, but they ended up costing a lot of time and energy and staff time and money to get done. Maybe those are things that now get to fade away, or we do them differently because we've had this weird time, as you put it. How are you coaching that? What do we need to keep? What do we need to let go of piece?
Really helping. I've asked leaders to look at their strategic plan, which most of them don't have. Many of them have it in their head, so it's not a strategic plan. When I did some research on CEOs and asked them if they had a strategic plan, the numbers went down precipitously when I said, "Is it in writing?" We had over 1,000 CEOs that took this survey. Most of them don't have it in writing. They're just kind of understandably flying by the seat of their pants, but that means that's leaving everybody else in the dark. So part of it is reminding everybody what isn't changing. One of the biggest leadership things in times of transition is to remind people what's staying the same. And if we have to say goodbye to people, or we have to furlough people, we want it to be for mission reasons, not for personnel reasons. It shouldn't be because you haven't had the guts to do what you needed to do before, although many nonprofits are taking that route. But then looking at the numbers too, most nonprofits aren't really honest with themselves or associations about how much it costs to do an event. They look at space or stuff, tchotchke, but they don't factor in staff salary. And if you start doing that, it becomes a money-losing proposition if fundraising is your only goal. Marketing, community building, there could be other goals, but fundraising isn't usually best served by an event.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting.
One-on-one asking is the best way to do it. Talking to people, saying, this is something that's really exciting that's going on, or even in the midst of all this, we've seen symphony orchestras that have had to cancel their season, but they're still raising more money because people value the symphony and want them to be back strong when they're able to regather. So it's, again, not trying to read the mind of donors, not trying to make their mind up for them, but offering them, we don't know where you're at in this pandemic, but if you're able to help, we really want to be back when things are able to gather again, when it's safe.
So you bring up an interesting thing using symphony orchestras as an example. Many years ago, I was on a young professionals board for the Austin Symphony. It was called the Austin Symphony Bats. It was a young professionals fundraising arm of the local symphony. And when you said that, all of a sudden, everything I sort of learned about fundraising from a symphony sort of popped back into my head, like from 15 years, 20 years ago. So here's the question I have, though. Looking at symphonies, and I know you work with a lot of groups that are like that around the country, some of them are probably doing just what you said. They're raising a ton of money, but I also bet a lot of them aren't. So what's the difference using symphonies in cities as an example? What's the delta between the ones who are raising more money than ever and the ones who are raising no money?
I have good friends in both sets of organizations, so I don't know that it's a complex answer. You know, there's more than one answer to that, but an answer is that the people that are still raising money are being able to see the future and know why they're there. Why do they exist? What would the world not have if their organization ceased to exist? And I think the pandemic has proven the arts in particular are important. People are consuming the arts more than ever. It's just, we need to present it in ways that are different than what we're used to. And I think that's where I'm seeing a lot of people having a hard time. Major gift officers and nonprofits, people that have been taught by people like me in my training that face-to-face is the best way to ask, are feeling like their entire arsenal for doing their work has been hobbled. It's been ripped away. And they forget that it's actually two human beings talking together and inviting each other to take action to support a common cause. So it doesn't have to be face-to-face. If we can't be face-to-face, we have phone operators now, phone callers that are raising more money than major gift officers because they're listening and they're hearing what people are saying important to them, and they're finding aspects of their cause that line up with that.
That's
but
really
I'm sorry, Liz, you have to get out of your head. That's the crazy part to me. And this is, I'm talking to me too, three fingers pointing right back at me. The script that we have in our head, the doom and gloom is really contagious, and it's real. It's not that it's not real, but there's another reality too. It's sort of like if I were to call you, Tom, I might pick up the phone and think, oh, I'm probably going to be bugging him. I'm probably interrupting him. He probably doesn't even want to talk to me right now. It's probably a really hard time for him, and I won't call. But that is lying just as much as me saying, I bet he's waiting to hear from me. I bet he just came into a ton of money and is wondering, where do I give this? I have to give some of it away. I bet he's really looking for the opportunity because he just won the lottery. Those are both lies, but I find the ones about the positivity give me at least the energy to make the call and do the right thing.
So what you're talking about here isn't just for nonprofits. This is true for all of us in every single industry, because as you're talking about this, I'm starting to run the parallels to my speaking business. And, you know, it's like so easy to say, oh, they don't want to hear from me. And if you thought, wow, I bet they really could use what I have, it's easier to pick up the call. And then the other piece of that sort of sticks in my mind is, if you're paralyzing yourself by giving yourself excuses not to call, you can't raise any money or you can't get any clients.
right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
To me, it goes back. I love the title of your book. Say it again.
The Surprising Gift of Doubt, thanks to Tamsin Webster and her red line.
Oh, yes. Very nice. In doubt, isn't that what we all have before we pick up the phone? Like, we're doubting ourselves, we're doubting what we have to offer. So tell us a little bit about why doubt is a surprising gift.
Excellent. Thank you. Traditionally, when we get into leadership or we take on roles, we look to the people that we've seen do it before. So parents, coaches, teachers, people that have led. And then when that doesn't work for us because we're not them, they make it look so easy, but it doesn't work. We move into what I call quadrant 2 leadership, which is where you start looking externally. You keep looking externally, but you look for webinars, podcasts, live presentations like this to try to fix what's wrong with you. And those fixes don't always fit. It's kind of like taking a suit off the rack. It doesn't always fit exactly for you, but it'll get you certain ways. Many of us that are really conscientious as leaders feel like that's a moral failing. Man, getting things done by David Allen doesn't work for me. I must be a loser. The book jacket says it works for everybody. These people say it really changed their lives. And many of us, some people a lot of people have a lot of success just bouncing around quadrant 3, kind of the high of hitting a new system and the low of having it fail again. Others break through and think about that. Am I permanently broken, or is it just not working for me? And when they move into what I call quadrant 3 is where they take doubt and they use it as an invitation to do this internal journey of what are their core values? What are their mission and vision? What are the stories they're telling themselves? And what are their goals? And how do those give them a unique way of looking at the world, organizationally or as a person? And I think that's what the pandemic is driving a lot of people, or inviting a lot of people into, kicking and screaming, some of us.
So let's talk more about your book. Who is your book written for, and when does it come out?
It's coming out in March 2021, and it's written for, it's a distillation of the last 15 years of coaching. I've been doing coaching of leaders since 2003. I started out as fundraising coach, fundraisingcoach.com, because I have experience and success in fundraising and have books on that. But I kept getting board members asking me, could you coach me too? And tech startups and others coming to me. So this is an expansion of that coaching philosophy. I don't know if either of you have done coaching or had to explain coaching, but it's really hard to explain sometimes, because it's not like consulting where you take somebody from step A to step B to step C to step D. With coaching, it's much more client-centered, so it can sound like you're selling snake oil. What do you do? Well, I help you become your full potential. How do you do that? By asking you really good questions. Yeah, that sounds really weird. So the surprising gift of doubt, I distill the 9 areas that I use in my toolkit working with leaders and give them ways and exercises to do it and themselves. So they don't have to, it's not about me, it's about them growing. One of the coolest things both of you may appreciate is that with the endorsements that I've got coming in, they're great endorsements. Seth Godin was one of the first ones that said, this is an amazing book, which is awesome. But there are tons of others, great endorsements. And most of the people that are saying this is a great book are saying, whatever their blurb is, and then saying, hey, thank you so much for that exercise on page 72 or page 84, or that one where you're trying to find the heroes and the stories and identify your own programming through that. I totally am doing that. I've never had a book that's done this before. I've written a lot of books, but this is the first one where the reviewers are saying, this is changing me. Thank you.
So how do I get to review this book then?
I can make that happen. That's a good question. And I can make that happen.
Because I don't want to wait till March.
I appreciate that.
I'm a big fan of a book with exercises. I am not very good at that sort of passive information gathering that just isn't part of my learning style. But if you make me do an exercise, always going to be a better fit for me.
Well, I'm really glad. I've been testing this out for the last 2.5 years with live presentations before the pandemic, and even had people fly into Greenville, where I am in Greenville, South Carolina, and do a whole day going through the exercises. So I feel so privileged that I got to have live interaction with people before I wasn't allowed to have it except through a screen. So that definitely influences the book a lot.
So Marc, let's take this back to where we started. Let's go back to these nonprofits. Our theme for this season, as we said, is don't cancel your event. And today we wanted to sort of morph that to don't cancel your fundraising. So
right.
Let's go back to these nonprofits. And what advice do you have for anyone who is in that fundraising mode for a nonprofit? What should they be doing today? Give us 3 or 4 tips.
So such a good question. There are, if it comes to fundraising in particular, look to see who has given in the past year, I'd say calendar year, but not yet this year. Look to see lifetime, who are your top 10% or 20% of donors. And also look to see who are your most loyal donors if you keep that record. Who gives year after year after year. You want to look at who the first set is, looking at who gave last year but not yet this year, because you just want to they're the most likely to renew. Just like a customer, they're the frequency part. The customer that just bought something from you is most likely to buy again. The donor that just gave to you is most likely to give again. And reach out to them either by saying, how are you doing? Or by saying, by having an ask. There's no non-essential nonprofit. Even if you're not COVID related, you are existing because you're fighting a fight, and donors want to be part of that fight. And we've seen this. March fundraising was off the charts for the nonprofits that asked. March fundraising was better than December fundraising. April fundraising was better. June was even better. And then there was a dip for a lot of nonprofits in July. Do you know why there was a dip? Fundraisers got tired. So they started reporting back to people, and they stopped asking as much because it takes a lot of effort. But they were asking some of the same donors, annual donors, they were asking 2 or 3 times a year, 2 or 3 times in that time. And the donors were saying, thank you so much. We want something tangible to be able to do. We feel like the world is out of control and we value what's going on there. So first one is not letting people, just not leaving any cracks for people to fall through. The second one is looking at your top donors lifetime, because sometimes you forget they were with you 5 years ago and you just lost touch with them. And so those are really, really good people to reconnect with. And then I love the forced integrity in fundraising, where if you look at the people that are giving $10 a month or $100 a year in and year out, those are some of your best planned giving people. And planned giving in a pandemic is a little bit, you have to be very nuanced in how you talk about end of life giving, because you don't want it to come across like the University of Mississippi that said, well, you're going to die anyway because it's a pandemic, so make sure we're in your will. That's not really
I missed that, and I cringe when I hear this.
Oh, it was, a lot of us were just like, did they read their copy before they sent it out? Because that was not right. So, but those loyal donors that aren't having the flashiness, they're the kind of the millionaire next door, are often some of the best gifts for planned giving and for some transformational gifts. Some of the biggest donors that you'll ever have test you out with the $100 gifts and see how you treat them.
Wow. Oh, interesting. That's very interesting.
That's a little nugget of information there.
So 2 ways to know that they're treated, so to be sure you're treating them well, is Adrian Sargent is a university professor both in the UK and here, who's the leading philanthropic researcher. He actually studies what works in philanthropy. And he found that there's just, do you know the golden hour in medical things? If somebody has an accident, emergency technicians know that they have 60 minutes to stabilize them, and their outcomes are much better. For donors, it's 90 days. 90 days after a donor makes a gift, you have a window to show them the impact. And if you show them their impact and that they made a good decision, they're much more likely to give again. But right now, if you took a list of 10 donors to your organization over the last year, you could just take a Sharpie and cross out 6 of those names, because they're never going to give again. We have a 40% retention rate in the sector because we're not thanking our donors. So just making sure that they know your gift made a difference is really important. The way to do that, which is so counterintuitive, and I love this about fundraising, I think it's about marketing too, or sales anyway, is to get out of the way. Most nonprofit letters are all about the nonprofit and the process and the success stories, so the donor doesn't realize there's a problem. It looks like you got everything under control and you don't need me. And the ask is this mealy mouth sort of, will you help us pay our bills? About 3/4 of the way down on the page, will you help us pay our bills by making your gift too? Nobody wants to pay your bills. People want to have an impact. So what we've found is that if you take actually a red Sharpie with your letter, circle every reference to we, us, and ours, and the nonprofit, and try to remove those from the letter and make it all about the donor and whatever impact you're having. Those are the people have doubled and tripled their fundraising effectiveness just by doing that one thing alone in letters.
Wow.
So I will say one of the universities that our daughters go to is a private university, and they are extraordinarily skilled at this.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, so when the pandemic hit, there were some students who could not leave the university for whatever reason. They didn't have a secure home to go to, or it was, they're from another country and they couldn't leave and go there, or whatever it was. So there were some students who were going to be sheltered in place at the university, and they asked for funds to help with food and necessities for those students. They were still getting food from the university, but still. And so we gave, and then we received a handwritten note from one of the students. Yes, right? I'm like, write him another check. It's just like, of course we're going to write him another check, because saw the impact almost immediately. I'm sure it was in those 90 days. It was probably within 45 days that the income, it was enough for the student to be able to say, here's what happened to me because of the donation that you gave. And it was not, there was nothing in it besides the thank you.
Even better.
Right?
Wow.
There was no like, give us another check. They got another check, but because we're like, oh, is that fund still open? We should give a little bit more. So is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we need to let our, where we need to let donors make their own decisions and use their own brain and tell us what their decision is instead of us making it for them. We also need to do that to the people we serve, for the people we serve. Oftentimes, I've worked in healthcare and other organizations, social services, where programs people really want to hold on tight to their clients. They don't want to let their clients tell their story because we don't want to objectify. We don't want to, and it's for good reasons. We don't want to objectify them. We don't want to sell their hardship. The flip side, though, is maybe they want to share their story.
Right.
And so ask them, is it all right if we share your story? Would you write a thank you note to the donor? Thank you notes are the most powerful way to get people hooked on philanthropy. So if you're on a board of trustees and nobody's doing asking, you can just get them to do a thank you note, just thanking session where you say, all you have to do is, hey, I'm so-and-so on the board of such and such. The staff tells me you gave last year. Thank you. We couldn't do this without you. That's all you need to say. The studies are varied on this, but most of them show a 10 to 25% revenue increase from the donors that get that thank you note versus the donors that don't.
I mean, that's legit. If you can raise yourself 15% by simply saying thank you, you should be saying thank you.
We should be saying it anyway, but you're right. It is legit. Yeah.
And Tom, that's one of the things you talk about in the networking piece is the power of a handwritten note.
Yeah. And it's harder right now for a lot of business to business people because people aren't in the office. So you have to get a little bit more creative about how you're making it personal. And so one of the things that a couple of clients I've been coaching on have started doing, because if they send it to the office, they don't know if the person will see it for a long time until it either gets forwarded home or until we return. So what some of my clients have started doing is just on their phone, filming a personal video and sending it by text, and literally saying, I would send you a handwritten note, but right now no one's in the office. So this is my video handwritten note. And I brainstormed this with a client and she's doing it constantly and said it's the best thing because it stands out like a handwritten note and it's only 30 seconds.
And we all carry this equipment with us. It doesn't take any special equipment or anything. That's brilliant. That's something that I wish nonprofits would do more, is wherever the mission is taking place, even if it's a behind the scenes thing, we can't go there right now because of travel restrictions, but here are the packets we're sending over. Even something like that. I had rabbis came to a boot camp that I helped present at a few years ago. And the rabbis, because the lead rabbi had told them, take a note, send it to your donors. And the rabbis were saying things like, hey, I'm here with all these other shluchim. It's a Chabad group. And we're learning how to ask for money so that you're not going to be on the hook the whole time every year. Or we're getting the professional development that you told us that you wanted us to get. And you're helping make this possible. And it was the most fun to see them get all excited too, because they knew it was what their donors wanted. And it was something that was showing them that there was a really good impact. But whatever the video is, that's smart, super smart.
One of the reasons that I love doing this show, and I think Tom is going to agree with me wholeheartedly, is there are people in our association that we've known for years, and I knew you were smart, and I knew you were generous, and I knew you were fun to be around. But to get to dive into what you do and how you work with people, I love this.
Well, thank you. This is definitely a don't cancel your event, don't cancel your fundraising type of time. And thank you for having me be part of this.
Well, and Eliz is right. That's my favorite part of why interviews are so much more powerful in a webinar format or in a conference format than a talking head over PowerPoint. Because I'm sure when you talk for a half hour and show a PowerPoint, it's powerful, but everyone who watches this now gets to know more about sort of the core of your message and the core of your heart. And that's why I'm a real big fan of this show and what we've done, because I think interviews are the future for events, both live and online. So thank you for being part of this, Marc. If somebody is like, I have to know Marc Pitman, how do they find you?
They can find me hopefully on all the socials, but Concord Leadership Group is the main brand. There's Fundraising Coach and Nonprofit Academy underneath that. And if they wanted to sort through their values to find that center as they go through this trying time, you can go to concordleadershipgroup.com/values and get a free value sorter there.
Ooh, very nice. Well, thank you so much, Marc, for being with us today and helping us learn a little more about doubt and why we shouldn't cancel our fundraising if we're a nonprofit. Love that. Thank you so much. We are going to be back on Wednesday with someone from World at Work to talk about, wow, what is coming up in terms of how they're taking their events into the virtual world. And if you want to know more about us, Tom, where would they go?
I think they should either go to our Facebook page, which is the Webinar Talk Show. You can see all the past episodes are there. And you can also find out a lot more and find out how to contact us if you go to webinartalkshow.com.
We'll see you on Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. Until then, have a great rest of your day.